It's mock draft season, and it's full throttle. What do the Raiders do at 13? How about 44? That plus a whole lot more comes up on today's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for Wednesday, March 20th, 2024.
Just win. Just win. Just win. Just win.
The autumn wind is a raider, pillaging just for fun. He'll knock you round and upside down and laugh when he's conquered and won. And won. And won. And won. And won.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. To get the latest edition of the show as soon as it becomes available, as always, if you're checking us out on YouTube, thank you. Appreciate you so much. The show continues to grow each and every day. It's because of you and because of my man, Ari. Ari does a fantastic job each and every day getting us up on YouTube, making us look good, make us sound good. He shines us up. He makes us look pretty, all that good stuff. That's because of my man, Ari. You can check him out on Twitter at Ari Produces. You can hit me up as well at your boy Q254. And we got the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line at 707-654-4693. Your calls and texts will come up in segment number 3. A lot of feedback that we're getting about a bunch of different conversations. Of course, it's mock draft season. It's out in full throttle. So a lot of conversation going on. Segment number 3, your calls and texts. Segment number 2, what do you do at number 13 if Michael Penix is your guy? Do you take him? Or do you roll the dice and wait till a little bit later, try to get him in round 2, or maybe even trade up to the back end of round 1? Why do I ask that question? Well, we'll talk about it in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Here in segment number 1, news and notes of the day, as I always do, and we'll jump right into it after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is FanDuel. Make sure that make every moment more right now. New customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started today. So off top, I want to go all the way in just on the NFL draft, as it is mock draft season. There's a lot of folks dropping their mock drafts. Some of them are 2.0, some of them are 3.0, and by the time we get to April 25th, it might be 10.0. But it's fun to kind of look at it and see what these different guys are talking about, what they're hearing, and what they're feeling when it comes to the NFL draft. So we'll jump right into that after I do tell you about Netflix dropping the news that they're going to have a receiver series. Like they had their quarterback series, they're going to have a receiver series, and Davante Adams is going to be featured on that. So it should be interesting to see what Netflix, how they feature Davante Adams, the 2023 season. Obviously, that was not his best season, and the Raiders wasn't their best season offensively, but they're going to have that series coming out on Netflix, so you can pay attention and look out for that. Again, they had the quarterback series. Now they're following that up with the wide receiver series, and Davante Adams is going to be a part of that. Now, with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into this draft conversation. I mentioned on Tuesday's show, Pro Football Focus, they did a 3-round mock draft. They had the Raiders taking Terrion Arnold, the cornerback out of Alabama, at 13. They had Michael Penix, the quarterback from Washington, going in round 2. Jalen McMillan, the wide receiver, going in round 3. Well, Daniel Jeremiah from NFL Network, a guy that I really respect his thoughts and his talent evaluation, and a guy that's been there, done that, and talks to a lot of people around the league. He dropped Mock Draft 3.0 on Tuesday, and he has the Raiders taking Michael Penix at 13. He says, Washington quarterback Michael Penix, the Raiders signed Gardner Minshew to compete against Aiden O'Connell. However, I don't think those two quarterbacks have the ceiling that Penix does in the NFL. There's an assumption that Penix is more of a second-rounder, but I believe his skill set is a unique fit for the Raiders' style of play. So that's one evaluator right there, Daniel Jeremiah, who has Michael Penix going at number 13 overall to the Silver and Black. Well, my guy, Mel Kiper Jr., he dropped his mock draft 2.0 on Tuesday, and he has 5 quarterbacks going in round 1. Michael Penix was not one of them. And the 5 quarterbacks, none of them were selected by the Silver and Black. As a matter of fact, he was on Unsportsmanlike on ESPN Radio on Tuesday morning. That's the morning show there with Evan Cohen and Michelle Smallman and my guy Chris Canty. And he was talking about the 5 quarterbacks and where he expected them to go in April's draft.
Yeah, the spots are tricky. three, but the five quarterbacks really aren't, because of Bo Nix in Denver makes sense with Sean Payton, seeing a little Drew Brees in him. So I'll go from 12 and work my way up. So 12, Denver. They don't have the second-round pick. They are in the AFC. They're in a division with Mahomes and Herbert. They got to get that quarterback. And I think Payton will see a lot of Brees. Remember, with Brees, you talked about a guy who was able to get some rushing touchdowns at 546 rushing yards his last year at Purdue. Bo Nix, 20 rushing touchdowns the last 2 years at Oregon. Completion percentage for Bo Nix at 77%. Drew Brees, very accurate. Hand size for Brees, the same as Nix. Both were at 215 pounds. Nix a little taller at 6'2" than Drew at 6'1". Both professional. Both guys that get the job done. But Bo Nix is 24 years of age. But for Sean Payton, I think that makes sense. Then you go to J.J. McCarthy to Minnesota. Are they going to trade up? Are they going to stay where they are? What's going to happen with the Giants at 6? McCarthy for Minnesota want to move up. And you also hear Minnesota could move up to get Drake May if New England wants to move out of 3, which would shock me because New England needs a quarterback as much as they do. Then you go down to New England. New England needs the quarterback. Drake May would be the third quarterback off the board. Didn't have the phenomenal end of the season like he did in 2022 when he struggled against the likes of Virginia and NC State, but he's got a ton of talent, and he lost his offensive coordinator and his top receiver, okay? Then you go to Jaden, Washington. They made a lot of additions in free agency. They got this team better on both sides of the ball. Everything's new in Washington, GM, coach, everything. Now you get Jaden Daniels, and that's perfect. Then you go to number 1. Now that it's not any debate, Justin Fields should be there. That's my opinion, but he's in Pittsburgh. Now it's Caleb Williams' team. They're making, obviously, improvements there. Ryan Poles is. Remember, Ryan Poles was the director of college scouting in Kansas City when they drafted Patrick Mahomes. Now, the one thing is 6, the Giants. I thought about McCarthy there, to bring him in. Daniel Jones had that competition there, and he could be the heir apparent, but I went with the wide receiver.
So there you go. 5 quarterbacks in the top 12 picks, from Caleb Williams to Jaden Daniels to Drake May, J.J. McCarthy, and then Bo Nix. No Michael Penix, and no Raiders selecting a quarterback in the top 5 or top 12, or in the first round, I should say, to be honest. And so, at 13 for the Raiders, he had Alabama offensive tackle J.C. Latham. Now, side note, when it comes to my guy Mel Kiper Jr., he's got a conference call today. Excited about that. He always does the pre-draft conference calls. Always enjoy hopping on it. 7:15 a.m. Pacific time is when I'll be on this call. It'll probably be about 2 hours long, 2 hours strong, but I always look forward to that. So you'll get some great sound from Mel coming up on tomorrow's show. And I know some people don't like the way I say his name, but that's okay. If I can say like that to him, I can say it like that to anybody. So, it just kind of is what it is. But no quarterback for the Raiders, according to Mel, in round 1. So clearly he has Michael Penix there in round 2. Well, Jason Fitz, formerly at ESPN, he's part of Yahoo now, does a fantastic job. He's a guest on the Morning Tailgate on Raider Nation Radio 920 with Vinny, Clay, and Lindsay every single Tuesday morning, I believe, at 8 a.m. He's a guest on the show. He does a fantastic job just breaking down everything NFL related. Of course, he's a big Raider fan as well. He was asked, matter of fact, Vinny asked him that exact question. If Michael Penix is the Raiders guy, and we're not saying that he is, but if he's their guy and he's there at 13, do you get him right there at 13, or do you roll the dice and try to wait till round 2, pick number 44, or maybe try to trade back into the end of round 1 and get him? Here's Jason Fitz on the Morning Tailgate on Raider Nation Radio 920 on Tuesday answering that question.
I love that question because ultimately we get into the draft sometimes and we treat it like it's Madden, and like if you're the Raiders and you feel like, you know what, Penix is our guy, why are you messing around with it? What is the difference between picking at 13 or picking at, let's say, 18, and you pick up an extra second rounder somewhere? I know we all want to covet these second rounders like they're great, but at the end of the day, like if you take that trade down and then somebody else trades up in front of you because they know that you're still in the quarterback market and they want to get themselves one, you're up a creek, right? Like this is very simple. If the Raiders evaluation says that Penix is the guy and they're sitting at 13, I have absolutely no problem saying, I don't care what anybody thinks of the value. We have a quarterback that we like. He's available for us right now. We don't want to mess around. Like, this is one of those really simple moments where, like, keep it simple. If Telesco's board says, yeah, Penix is our guy and we really like him and he's available at 13, I don't care what any national media member says about, well, you should have traded down. Like, if DJ is saying that Penix at 13 is something that he's got his eye on, I think that probably speaks to the fact that people understand the Raiders need a quarterback. And again, if their evaluation supports it, then do it. Don't even think don't even mess around with this because, we'll all be going nuts if the Raiders trade down to 20, and then all of a sudden they end up taking a corner at 20 and they don't address quarterback, and we find out later that they just let the guy that they wanted walk. That's a terrible strategy.
So there you go. He says you don't even think about it. Don't overthink it. Just go and get the quarterback at number 13. If he's your guy, just go get him. Don't risk the chance of not getting him at some point, and think that he's going to be there at round 2. And the one thing about that is I would look at a team like Seattle, who's sitting there at 16, and that would be the team that I'd be concerned about if the Raiders don't pick Michael Penix at number 13. And we're going to talk about Penix in itself coming up in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. But I will say that 16 is where I would look for a potential Michael Penix sighting if he doesn't get picked, in the top 13. I could see Seattle getting him there. They have his former offensive coordinator from the University of Washington, and the quarterbacks that they have there right now, Geno Smith going into the last year of his contract extension that he got, and then they just picked up Sam Howell from Washington. So I don't expect those guys to be the long-term solution at the starting quarterback position. So maybe 16 would be a landing spot for one Michael Penix. If not, where does he go? Does the Raiders get him at 13? Do they get him at 44? Do they trade back up into the back end of round number 1? Well, we'll kind of compare and contrast what the Raiders could do at pick number 13. It could be Penix. It could be others. Who are the others? Well, we'll talk about all that coming up in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about eBay Motors. With passion, drive, and patience, that's what brings home the winning trophy. It's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want to talk exclusively about Michael Penix and if his availability is there at number 13 when the Raiders draft. And the reason that we're talking about this is if you look at the top of the draft, it looks like the Raiders are pretty much going to be frozen out from being able to trade up and go get the guy that everyone in Raider Nation wants. At least I know I want, at Jaden Daniels, the quarterback out of LSU. Feels like number 1 is going to be Caleb Williams. Number 2 is either going to be Jaden Daniels or Drake May. Number 3 is going to be either Jaden Daniels or Drake May. And then it looks like Minnesota is going to try to trade up to that number 4 spot as they acquired another number 1 pick and number 23 overall from the Houston Texans on Friday. So now they can package those picks and move up to the number 4 spot. And we all believe that they're going to get J.J. McCarthy. And then, as you heard Mel Kiper in segment number 1, he says Bo Nix to the Denver Broncos at number 12. But he did not have Michael Penix going number 13. He did not even have him going in the first round. So do the Raiders take him at 13, or do you take a chance and, roll the dice and go get a big-time offensive tackle, a big-time cornerback, or what do you do at that spot at 13? Or do you just play it safe like you heard from Jason Fitz and go get the quarterback and not overthink it? Now, it would be easy normally to say, just go get the quarterback and not overthink it. But knowing that the Raiders have needs at the cornerback position and offensive tackle, I feel like if there's a few guys there at 13, the conversation is going to be difficult, right? I mean, think about it. The top cornerback could be available, like Pro Football Focus had the Raiders taking Terrion Arnold from Alabama. There's also Quinyon Mitchell. If one of those 2 guys is there at 13, I think that's a real conversation you have to have. Are you going quarterback or are you going cornerback? Right? If you can get a true guy that you think is an alpha dog, to have him across from Jack Jones, who still obviously has a little bit to prove, but you know what his ability looks like, then all of a sudden you have a really good 1-2 punch. And I've said it before, you still have Jacorian Bennett coming back. In year 2, he was the 4th-round pick out of Maryland, and everyone's expecting him to step up. But, again, that's an expectation. It's not something that is guaranteed. There's another cornerback that can go in the first round, Nate Wiggins from Clemson, but I feel like he's not a number 13 overall pick type guy. He's a guy that you get a little bit later in round 1, maybe even potentially round 2, depending on what happens. So I'm really looking at the top corners, Arnold and Quinyon Mitchell. So that could be an option for the Raiders at 13. Offensive tackle. We know that the right side needs to be addressed. J.C. Latham from Alabama was the guy that Mel Kiper had at number 13 overall for the Raiders in his mock draft 2.0. Obviously, the top offensive lineman, Joe Alt from Notre Dame, he'll be long gone by 13. He's a true left tackle. He'll be that left tackle. Fuaga from Oregon State, he's a guy that you can slide into that right tackle spot. He could be there at 13. Fontenot from Washington, he could be there at 13. Latham, who I mentioned before, he's a true right tackle. He's probably the truest right tackle that's going to go in round number 1. He's a guy, he's a big dude. The only thing that worries me and concerns me about Latham is he had a bunch of penalties. That's a concern. And then obviously him being banged up and having a bunch of injuries as well. That's also a concern. You got to have availability. I know no one likes to hear it, but your best ability is availability, right? So there's no doubt about that. Guyton from Oklahoma, he's another guy, but I feel like you can probably get him a little bit later in round 1. Mims from Georgia, same thing about him. Fashanu from Penn State, he's another guy that you can slide in there. So it kind of, as I roll out these offensive tackle names, kind of makes me feel like maybe the Raiders could pass on an offensive tackle there and still get one a little bit later on and feel really confident about him. Because, again, this draft is pretty deep. Matter of fact, it's very deep in cornerbacks and offensive tackles. So maybe that's the argument to not passing on the quarterback and getting, a Michael Penix if he's your guy. It's actually a conversation I had on Raider Nation Radio 920 on Tuesday, and I just thought I'd bring it to the podcast as well. How about this? How about adding this to the mix? And we've had calls here on the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line about this guy. What if the top defensive tackle's there and Byron Murphy? I know it's not area of need, but what if he's Tom Telesco's best guy available on the board at that point? What if he has it and he truly says, we're going to go with the best player available? That's Byron Murphy. They already made the move for Christian Wilkins. He's a big ticket free agent guy. They brought back Jenkins. They brought back Butler. Could they draft Murphy too and make that a super strength? Right? We talked about that a little bit on the show on Tuesday. I had the call in response to that. They could do that as well. And I wouldn't be mad at that. The one thing I do believe is that Antonio Pierce is going to continue to strengthen the defense every chance he gets, no matter what area it is. And the better pass rush you have, we know the better the corners are going to be. The better pass rush you have, the better the linebackers are going to be. The more guys that could be block eaters and space eaters on that defensive line, the better the linebackers, the better the back end, the safeties are going to be. The defense gets better the more pass rush you have. So you could look. I think that, again, Byron Murphy would be a luxury for the Raiders, but it's not something that's out of the realm of possibility. Or you could roll the dice with Penix. And I would have no problem with that. I think that he's a really good quarterback. Liked him a lot at Washington. I just know that for me, I look at it and I get a little greedy if I see those top corners there and maybe those top offensive tackles, knowing that the right side of that offensive line needs to be addressed. And I'd like to see one top flight cornerback added to the mix as well. So I guess that's the big question. Do you get a little crazy? I mean, you're in Vegas. Do you roll the dice, take a little bit of a gamble? I can't see Michael Penix being there at 44, but I also didn't think Will Levis last season was going to be available in the second round, and the Tennessee Titans got him in round 2, right? I didn't think Hendon Hooker was going to be available in round 3, but he was available, right? I mean, there's a lot of times that we look at certain guys and we say, oh, he's going to be long gone by this, and then they're still there available. But then again, there could be a team, as I mentioned in segment number 1, like a Seattle, who's very familiar with Penix, who says, you know what, we can get this guy. We don't have to play him right now because we have Geno Smith, because we have Sam Howell. And then when it's that time to roll, we can feel comfortable with Michael Penix. Again, they have Washington's offensive coordinator, Washington University's offensive coordinator there in Seattle, who obviously knows Michael Penix really well, as they just went to the national championship game, lost, but went to the national championship game against Michigan. So that's the question that I throw out there to you, Raider Nation. What would you do in that situation? And this all depends on if Michael Penix is your guy. I guess you could put Bo Nix in the same situation if he's there at 13 and he's your guy. For me, it's Michael Penix, and it seems like more of these outlets are penciling in Michael Penix to the Raiders, some at 13, some at 44. I had Tashawn Reed on from The Athletic on my radio show on Tuesday, and he actually did a mock draft for The Athletic that he said is coming out on Friday, and he said he ended up with 2 first-round picks. So to me, I feel like he took the best player available at 13, probably, I don't know, an Arnold or a Quinyon Mitchell or a big-time offensive tackle. I feel like he did one of those and then traded back up into the back end of round 1 and got Michael Penix. That's what I feel like he did. He didn't tell me that. He said it's dropping on The Athletic on Friday, so we could check that out. The Locked On Raiders, or not the Locked On Raiders podcast, but the Locked On Podcast Network in general, we're doing our mock draft that we do each and every year. We're going to do that on Thursday. I just saw the email that we're going to be doing that on Thursday, so I'll be part of that. And that's one of the decisions I have to make. If Penix is available at 13, do I get him there? Do I try to trade back and get him a little bit later? Do I, go and pick someone else and then try to trade back up into the back end of round 1? Like, there's a lot of different decisions that I have there at 13. I got to see. And then on top of that, maybe can I trade up? Can I get real crazy and trade up from 13 all the way up to like 2 and go get Jaden Daniels? I'm going to try to do that first and see if, Washington is willing to make a move there. I don't know if they are or not, but I'll try. I'll try that first and see what happens. So there's a lot of different options for the Raiders, but trading up into the top 3, it does look like it's a long shot for the Silver and Black, but it's not a long shot that I don't think that they're not going to try to attempt. I definitely believe that they're going to try to do everything they can to get up there, but it doesn't look very promising at this point. So what do you think? 707-654-4693. That's the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line. If Michael Penix is your guy at number 13, do you pick him or do you go with potentially the best player available, like a corner, offensive line, and roll the dice and got Michael Penix, try to get Michael Penix a little later, either in the back end of round 1 or in round 2 with your number 44 overall pick? Or you could do like the Raiders did with Michael Mayer and trade up a little bit into the top end around number 2 and get their guy then. Either way, you're rolling the dice and not getting Michael Penix right there at 13. What would you do? Let me know about it. Again, 707-654-4693. That's the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line. Your calls and texts are coming up next in segment number 3 of today's show. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is FanDuel. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a number 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's number 1 sportsbook. And if you're like me, you're a prisoner of the moment, you probably have Iowa State as your champion. That's who I have. I actually have all 2 seeds as my final 4, but I have Iowa State winning the whole thing. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who's going to win it all like I did. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon, bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raider podcast. Your calls and texts off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Let's start things off with Jacob in Hanford. He's calling to ask a question or two about undrafted free agent Dalton Wagner, the offensive lineman from a year ago. Here he is, Jacob in Hanford.
What's up, Q? This is Jacob from Hanford. I had a quick question, 2 quick questions, actually, and they're both about one Dalton Wagner, a guy that we signed last year as an unrestricted free agent. The first question is, do we still have his rights? Is he still with the team? Because I've heard a lot of people talk about our tackles, and Wagner is just not being mentioned. And 2, if we do still have his rights, my question to you is, what do you think about him? Did you get a good look at him? Do you think that he is a potential starter for this team? I know that he was a big guy, and in college he was very overlooked. And so I wanted to see what your opinion was of him. I actually like him. I looked at some of his tape, and I'm just a regular dude. But still, I wanted to see what your opinion was on him. Let me know what you think, Q. Can Dalton Wagner be the starter for the Raiders? Is he even a Raider right now? Anyway, appreciate everything you do, Q. Take it easy. Go Raiders.
Thank you for the call. Appreciate you, my man. And yeah, Wagner's still on the team. He was put on IR last season. He'll be back this year healthy. The staff last season, obviously it's been replaced. Carmen Brasillo's no longer there. Obviously Josh McDaniels is no longer there. Dave Ziegler and company. They were all disappointed when he got hurt. They had some pretty high hopes for him, but he went on IR. And he's injured quite a bit. That's the one big thing I'll say about Dalton Wagner. That was his issue back at Arkansas. He would get banged up and injured quite a bit, and so that really hurt his draft stock, and that's what partially led to him being an undrafted free agent. So he's not a guy that I would say, oh, yeah, he could start right now. He could definitely compete. I think he's sitting behind Thayer Munford right now. They're going to definitely compete, but I don't believe that either one of those guys are going to stop the Raiders from addressing the offensive line, especially at that right tackle position coming up at the end of April. So thanks so much for the call. I do appreciate you. Up next, got a text from A.A. Ron in San Diego. Q, the price to move up to 2 to 3 was never some picks plus Renfro. That drove me nuts listening to people suggest that. Other teams that need a quarterback aren't stupid and have every reason not to trade down. It's probably a 1 and a 3 pick, maybe even a 1 and 2 in 2024, plus a 1 and a 2 in 2025, and a young player like Mayer or Kuntz or Devontae and high picks this year and next. That's realistic. You like Jaden Daniels? That's the price. You doing it? I don't think the Raiders will. I like Wilkins. I hated the Telesco hire. Still don't think the top 3 picks are going to be traded anyway, but let's finally have a real conversation about the price to go get their guy and not some BS fantasy. Thanks, A.A. Ron in San Diego. A.A. Ron, thank you, brother, for the text, first of all. Sound a little angry, but it's okay. It happens, I guess. The draft is about a month away. The thing about it is, one, here on this outlet, you're never going to get some fantasy pushed at you. I'm never going to blow smoke up your backside. I'm not going to do that. Now, I'll talk to people, and if they tell me that this is what they're thinking, I don't mind passing that along. If you believe it and choose not to believe it, that's okay. I respect that. But I'm never going to give you some fantasy BS just to try to entertain you. I got way more to do with my time than try to be just some entertaining guy throwing anything against the wall and hoping it sticks. So I did talk about Renfro when I was at the Combine. That was a guy that was thrown into the mix by people that were there, that were Washington media, that were saying, that could be, part of the equation to get up to number 2. So that's where that came from, at least here on this show. But again, it was never some BS fantasy that I was trying to throw at you. I do appreciate that. But as far as the price of doing business, Daniel Jeremiah is one guy that I very well respect. I talked to him before the Combine, and I actually asked him the question about trading up from 13 to 3. He actually gave me the exact cost of doing business according to, the price of the picks and the value of the picks. And I still believe you need to put a little bit more than that on it. But here's what Daniel Jeremiah had to say to me. You'll hear my question and his answer when it comes to 13 to 3 coming up in the draft. DJ, with that being said about the Patriots sitting there at number 3, if they chose to trade back and a team like the Raiders are sitting there at 13, try to make that huge move all the way up there, what would that cost?
All right, I think I've got that for you. We ran the numbers on some of these trades. This would be the Raiders. Let's see here. Yeah, the Raiders go up to 3. So here's your cost for the Raiders to go up to 3. It would be the 13th overall pick. It would be your first round pick and third round pick in 25 and your first round pick in 26. So, it's not cheap. A couple ones, 13th this year and then 2 more. So 3 total ones as well as a third round pick, which, if you love a quarterback and he can be your guy for the next decade plus, I could get behind that. We'll talk about this at the Combine on the coverage when we do some of these quarterback chats. The track record of the quarterbacks that got traded up for has not been good. There's usually a reason why teams are willing to move off that spot, and that hasn't traditionally bode very well for the teams who are aggressive coming up for guys. So one thing to keep in mind, but man, if you love it, and it's a bold move, but I don't know who their quarterback is right now. So if they don't land somebody in free agency, maybe that even makes them more inclined to go do that. You also have you have the Antonio Pierce connection with Jaden Daniels at Arizona State, so I'm sure they'll know him extremely well.
So that was Daniel Jeremiah. Again, that was pre-Combine. Things have changed. Obviously, quarterbacks have been traded from the 1, 2, and 3 teams. And so you're right. They probably don't trade out of that spot because they need quarterbacks. But it doesn't mean that the Raiders can't try, or it doesn't mean that any other team can't try. Like you saw Minnesota. They already collected another first-round pick from the Texans in efforts to try to get up to the top 4, try to get up to, the Arizona Cardinals at 4 and get their guy, J.J. McCarthy. Maybe the Raiders try to do something like that. Like, I'm not ruling anything out right now. I know it doesn't fit your narrative and what you're talking about or the conversation you want to have. I get it. And it may be in your mind a BS fantasy. That's cool too. I respect that. But until it's actually set in stone and said and done, I mean, I don't think that there's any reason why they wouldn't try, right? The worst that could happen, just like me throughout the course of my life, I've asked a lot of questions and asked for a lot of things, and people told me no a lot of times, and that's okay. You're guaranteed to miss the shot you don't take. I believe the Raiders will take their shot. Doesn't mean they're going to connect. Doesn't mean it's going to be a splash like Steph Curry from 3. But I do believe they're going to try. And that's, at the end of the day, it's all it's about. Draft's a month away. So sooner rather than later, we'll know the answer to that. It might be sooner if they do make a move. before the draft. But thank you for the text. I do appreciate you. I hope you have a blessed day, my man. Got a call here from Raider Kev. He's calling to talk about the top 3 quarterbacks and how he thinks that things are going to go. Then he talks about Michael Penix, the guy we talked about in segment number 2, and where he thinks he might end up. Here he is, Raider Kev.
What's up, Q? This is Raider Kev. Listen, man, I was a little disappointed that the Bears wound up trading Fields. I was hoping they stayed with Fields. And, I'm a big Jaden Daniels fan. I'm an LSU fan. I've been on Jaden to come to LSU from the beginning of the season, really, of the regular season last year. And I've stayed on that track. I think he's the guy that I really, really want to target. But it doesn't seem it seems bleak now. But I've been thinking about it, and I still see a window because I don't think some of these teams are going to be very smart. I think they're going to overthink it. For some reason, I know everyone thinks that Williams is going to go to the Bears. I have a feeling that Drake may be drafted by the Bears. I think that would leave a window for Williams to go to Washington. And again, not being smart, I think New England just may take JJ. Okay, that would leave number 4 and the Cardinals. That would be the window I see us getting Daniels. And if that doesn't work, if that doesn't happen, the issue with my other pick would be Penix. And I see us actually trading out of Penix, trading out of that 13 pick, and getting Penix later on, and maybe picking up another draft pick and getting him later on. The only other team that I'm worried about is Minnesota, the Vikings. I'm worried about what the Vikings are going to do. They have 2 picks in the first round, and they need a quarterback. So that's my only issue with trading back, and whether Penix is going to be available later on. But if we can get down, if we have to trade down and get above that 23 pick, that 23rd pick, I think we have a good shot of getting Penix. That's my 2 targets for quarterback, and let's make it happen, man. I'm excited for the draft and look forward to it. Go Raiders.
Kev, thanks for the call. I appreciate you. And yeah, Caleb Williams, being a Commander makes sense. It's something I said earlier. I think that he wants to be there, but from everything that we've seen and the way that everything's shaken out with Justin Fields no longer being in Chicago, Sam Howell in Washington, and Mac Jones is no longer in New England. It feels like it's going to go 1, 2, 3, and nobody's going to trade. But you never know. And Caleb Williams, the way he was talking at the Combine, he has his mind set on being the number 1 overall pick. I believe Chicago plans on bringing him in now. I thought I saw a report on that on Tuesday where he had canceled his meeting with Chicago before. So I think that they're probably going to end up getting him. But I understand the Caleb Williams to Washington just because he's from that area and obviously was there with Cliff Kingsbury at USC. Cliff was only there with him for a year, though, as an offensive assistant or analyst or whatever. So, it's not like it's a super connection. It's not like it's Lincoln Riley. But you understand they do have some familiarity. So all that does make sense. But, we'll have to see where it goes. As far as Penix, I mean, that's the convo today, right? Take him at 13 or wait, right? I mean, there's pros and cons to it. You can pick him at 13 and, you can let a big-time cornerback go and you can let a big-time offensive lineman go, and then you can have all the narratives out there. Oh, the Raiders reached. The Raiders reached for a quarterback. They should have just got the best player available. That quarterback would have been available in round 2. And maybe that doesn't matter. Maybe that conversation doesn't matter. And maybe you don't really care about addressing the cornerback room and the offensive tackle because you feel it's a deeper draft and you could do it later. That's a possibility. We'll have to wait and see, but I definitely think there's, it's almost like taking that piece of paper, like grabbing that pad and that pen and paper and saying, all right, let's weigh out the pros and weigh out the cons. All right, there's more pros to doing this, so let's go in that direction. There's less cons. Okay, cool. We'll do that. I mean, it could be as simple as that because it's definitely a roll of the dice. You might not get your guy. Just because you think you're going to get your guy doesn't mean that you will. But Raider Kev, thanks for the call, man. It's great to hear from you. I appreciate you. Got one more text. We'll take it from Just Win Will out the 816. It says, Q, my guy. Just Win Will out the 816 here. I was listening to your interview with Tashawn Reed, and something stood out to me. He said that Getsy runs a zone blocking scheme. Is that the reason possibly that Parker and Illuminor, et cetera, were able to seek deals elsewhere because they don't fit that blocking scheme? Which of the draft eligible linemen would also fit that blocking scheme? Does the scheme fit Aiden, Gardner? So many questions, Q. Please help a brother out. LOL. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. Maybe you could speak on one of those questions to Mel Kiper on offensive line fits. Thanks, Q. Go Raiders. That's Just Win Will out to 816. And that's a fantastic question. It really could be the reason why Illuminor wasn't brought back and the reason that Parker ended up with the 49ers. They might not be the fit that they're looking for. And, more times than not, teams are running that zone blocking scheme, and it's never been 100% successful for the Raiders, but it does have its benefits. And coming from that Kyle Shanahan tree, that you bring up a good point. And, Mike Shanahan always had 1,000-yard rushers, right? And, of course, you see what the 49ers do with their run game there in San Francisco. So, obviously, they have a ton of success. Luke Getsy is hoping to have that same success with the Raiders in Vegas. So, that's a great question. We'll figure that out. I'll get to the bottom of that, do a little bit of research. I'll be on the call with Mel Kiper Jr. later on this morning, 7:15 a.m. It starts Pacific time. So, we'll get some of that sound on the show tomorrow, plus a whole lot more. We'll have news and notes of the day as well, and, of course, calls and texts as we close out the show really, really strong. So, again, Just Win Will, thanks so much for the text. I appreciate you. Still got a call from Raider Dog in the 509, a text from Air Raid Vic in the 757. We'll definitely get both of those on the show tomorrow, plus a whole lot more. So, until then, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family, and most importantly, as always, just win, baby.